I opened my eyes and she said, "Congratulations, Mr. Junger, you made it. You almost died last night. No one thought you were going to make it. You're kind of a miracle." Then she left because she was doing her rounds. And I'm a mess. I'm throwing up blood. I got wires coming out all over the place. I'm a total mess. And I couldn't stop thinking about what she told me. And she came back and she said, "How you doing?" I said, "Well, not that great, actually. Like, what you said is terrifying. I had no idea I'd almost died. And I can't stop thinking about it." And she said the wisest thing I think just about anyone has ever said to me. She said, "Try this. Instead of thinking about it like something scary, try thinking about it like something sacred." And she walked out.
This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Good Lord, joined today by Sebastian Junger, journalist, best-selling author, documentary filmmaker. He's reported from the battlefield as an embedded war correspondent, written about humans interacting with dangerous jobs, with the natural world long ago. He had the huge international bestseller, The Perfect Storm. He's written an Outside magazine, where I used to be a correspondent, about many things, whale hunters, for one. Went on to do a ton of work about soldiers and the impacts of war. His latest book, In My Time of Dying, came out last year. It contemplates death and the afterlife after a near-death experience. The paperback version, who knows? If you're looking to save a few bucks, you might have to wait indefinitely. Spring of 26, so I'd recommend going and getting the hardcover. Other works from Sebastian include Fire, Tribe. I mentioned Perfect Storm already. I remember seeing, when that came out, the film with George Clooney and Mark Wahlberg after I read the book about a commercial sword fishing boat that never returned. So we're going to talk about his new book and also about his years as a war correspondent and a bunch of other stuff. Man, Sebastian, when you're when The Perfect Storm came out,
Yeah.
dude, that hit me hard, like in a good way. But you know, one of the biggest things is I used to be a climber for a tree service.
Really?
And I know that the story came out of that you were climbing.
Yeah.
You were a tree service climber, had a chainsaw injury.
Yep.
What was the chainsaw injury?
So I was doing a ton of work and I was exhausted. The area I lived in had been hit by a hurricane.
Oh, insurance work.
I was just doing work for homeowners that needed cheap tree work, and I was sort of a one-man show. And sometimes they'd be actually holding the lowering line, like the homeowner would be on the line, like that kind of thing, right? But I was doing a ton of work. I was a good climber, and I was exhausted. And I had a little climbing saw, and I was working in a big elm, and there was a little sucker that was like between my ankles, like it's sort of getting in the way, like a tiny little branch, right? And I just reached down. I was in the flow, right? I mean, I was sort of moving, right? And I would just reach down to zip it, this little sucker, to sort of zip it so it wouldn't like tangle up my feet. And I was just sloppy and in a hurry, and the tip of the bar hit the tree and popped up in the back of my ankle. And I wasn't spiking it, so I was wearing. I wasn't wearing big leather boots, right? Because I wasn't spiking the tree. It was a prune. And it just went right into the back of my ankle. And it didn't hurt, but I was like, something hit my ankle. The only thing moving down there was the chainsaw. I should just at least take a look to make sure I'm all right. And turned off the saw and clipped it onto my belt and pulled my pant leg up. And yeah, sure enough. So I could see my Achilles tendon. I mean, I was looking at it, right? But it wasn't severed, it wasn't cut, it just had been laid open. And I rappelled down to the ground, and my crew took me to a sort of urgent care place, and they sewed me up. And but it got me, I was limping for quite a while, and it got me thinking about dangerous work, and that there's all this work in this country that the nation needs, right? We need people drilling for oil. We need loggers. We need all kinds of people doing, commercial fishermen, and no one's really thinking about them. And they're taking casualty rates that, are sometimes comparable to units in the U.S. military, right? I mean, it's like there's the commercial fishing industry is deadly, right? And so I thought I'm going to write about dangerous work, and because no one's thinking about it, and these people deserve some love, basically.
You were already fixing to be a writer, though.
Yeah, I'd sort of muddled my way through my 20s trying to figure out how to be a freelance writer, and I waited tables for a while, and then I got this great job as a climber, which I was really proud. I was a terrible waiter, but I was a good climber, right? And so one of the things I really liked about climbing is that, it's inherently dangerous. You're 80 feet in the air with a chainsaw or whatever, and of course you can get killed up there. But I realized there's no random element. Like if you're going to get killed doing tree work, it's because you screwed up. Mm-hmm. It's like chess. You don't lose at chess because you rolled the dice wrong, right? You lose at chess because you made bad decisions and the other guy didn't. And tree work was the same way. If you don't make a mistake, you're going to be all right. So really focus, be in the moment right now, and be perfect. And there was almost a sort of Zen discipline to that mindset that I really, really liked.
Did you have awareness of commercial fishing from growing up? You grew up in Massachusetts, right?
Yeah, I mean, no, except that at the time I'd moved up to a fishing town called Gloucester with my girlfriend at the time, and I was doing tree work from there locally and in Boston, and writing, working on this writing project and that writing project. My girlfriend was a violinist, and pretty typical sort of bohemian, young person's life for a while. Very nice. And Gloucester was a really, rugged fishing town, and I was there. We were there, and I was limping around from my chainsaw wound when this huge storm hit the coast of New England. And the next day I found out that a Gloucester boat, the Andrea Gale with 6 men, had been lost 1,000 miles offshore, a long line.
What year was that again, that storm?
1991.
Okay.
And then there were these crazy rescues as well, and the seas offshore were measured at 100 feet, which was sort of record setting. The offshore data buoys were registering 100 feet. And
dude, you can't even do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't picture it.
Oh, God.
I mean, you got to picture
5 feet in a skiff. It's like, oh, my God, I'm going to die.
Yeah, when you're, you got to, I'm just trying to think of how to, you could probably explain it to listeners, but I mean, a 5-foot swell obscures everything. Yeah. A 5-foot swell, if you're in a small boat in a 5-foot swell, you're sub wave.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like when you look, it's just water. 100-foot waves.
Yeah, and this was a 68-foot steel-hulled longliner, but still 68 feet in seas of 70, 80 feet, 90 feet, it'll get overwhelmed, right? It can be flipped end over end, pitch poled, rolled, all kinds of things can happen.
Did that boat ever get recovered?
No. They don't know. They lost radio contact. They don't know where it went down.
I don't mean to jump ahead to the movie, but the visual. One of the visuals in the movie of the boat going up these waves and down these waves, I think, always stands out in my mind as something that's you're watching it and you're like, this can't happen on Earth.
Yeah.
Did you ever talk to people who had been in seas like that, and how accurately that captured the?
Yeah, I mean, I talked to them to research the book, so I didn't after the movie. I didn't because I'd done my work on that topic, but. Yeah, I mean, the boat disappeared, and I was trying to understand what it was probably like for those guys before they went down. So I talked to other captains of other boats sort of in the area that had survived. And I even talked to a guy named Ernie Hazard, whose boat was pitch-poled off George's Bank and flipped end over end, and he wound up trapped in a flooded cabin upside down at night in the North Atlantic. I mean, the ultimate nightmare, right? And he managed to, on a lungful of air, swim out through a busted window and make his way to the surface in this huge storm. And the life raft popped up right next to him, and he got in it, and he managed to survive. So I interviewed him about what's it like to be trapped in a flooded boat upside down at night. What's going through your mind? Because I was trying to recreate the state of mind of those guys in their last day, their last hours, their last minutes, and Yeah, so these captains said that the waves, they're huge, and the problem isn't that their individual waves are that big that they'll converge. Like waves they're coming at from different directions. They'll converge, and suddenly you have a wave that's twice as high as all the other waves, and they will just overwhelm you.
Oh man.
Yeah.
When you developed, I don't want to call it shtick, seems real condescending. That's not what I mean. But like when you decided to focus on that the dangerous work thing, did that become like a strategic professional decision, or was it personal obsession, or was it just like that you want to make a living as a writer, and would be a way that you could develop expertise and establish a name for yourself?
So I've always been a sort of purist about only working on things that I find so compelling that I would do that work for free if I had to, just in order to find out about that topic. And this was a case where I've never made purely commercial concerns. I think that like sort of ruins your work. But this was a case actually where a sort of a personal decision about what fascinated me actually coincided with something that turned out to be a great commercial decision. And I didn't strategize it like that. I've never thought like that in terms of my work, but it actually was a kind of good fit for where the marketplace was at the time. And no one had really. Studs Terkel wrote a great book called Working. It was an oral history of work, an amazing book, but it wasn't focused on dangerous work, right? And I just thought this is, there was a sort of class issue here. I mean, the people that do dangerous work are mostly, not exclusively, mostly working class males, and they get hurt and they die without much fanfare. And we're all depending on their work, right? And I mean, we we live in houses made out of wood that someone cut down, and we're eating fish, and on and on. We're driving cars that the oil got drilled out of the ground by somebody. And so I just all of that was really compelling to me, and it turned out to be a sort of gap in the market. No one had really focused on this yet, and so it worked.
Do you intentionally steer clear of some of the broader geopolitical concerns when you're getting like if you're talking about oil workers, you don't want to set it up like it's a debate about dependence on oil. Right. If you're talking about timber, you're not setting it up that it's a debate about how much old growth logging is too much. Right. Like you try to really focus on these people that are focus on the lives of people who are. It's kind of hard to put. Like Randall and I talk a lot about with market hunters of a century ago would be. They probably, if you quiz them, they're probably aware of the broader geopolitical market factors that are pushing them to do what they do, but their desire to participate or their moving into participate is like politically agnostic. It's like they're doing it because that's what's available to them.
Yeah. So there are great journalists, better journalists than I am in many ways, that are writing about the sort of macro issues. Yeah. I'm not an economist. I'm not a scientist. Whatever. There's people doing really good work about the urgent issues of our day, the economy, the climate, whatever, you name it, right? I'm not that guy, right? Like what really, and it interests me because I'm a part of the planet and part of this country, and I'm invested in in good outcomes, right? But I'm not. Intellectually, it doesn't interest me that much. What interests me is people's experiences, and that often gets lost in the reporting. And so when just to jump ahead a bit in my career, but many years later, when I was embedded with U.S. forces in Afghanistan, I had plenty of personal opinions about the war, and some positive, some critical, but I wanted to write about the soldiers, right? I was 173rd Airborne in a remote valley with a lot of combat, and I was interested in those guys. And they themselves were not thinking about the war in large scale terms. They just weren't thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
And so when I wrote my book War and made my film Restrepo about those guys, there was no discussion about the larger issues because those guys were not interested in it, and I wanted to make work that made people understand what it was like to be an American soldier in combat in Afghanistan, like end of sentence. And they're 20 years old, they're 21 years old. They're not. I wasn't thinking about the economy when I was 20. Like, why would they? Why would they think about the larger issues? They're already have their hands full just doing the job that's right in front of them.
If you go back to look at your work with swordfish longliners, where there's a disaster and lives are lost, and then you come in after and explain that. To become a war correspondent, you're like you're not in the after. It's like you're in the mix.
Right.
Do you mean that like it puts you on the long line boat?
Yeah.
In the storm.
Yeah.
What was that like? How did that with your family, friends? Did they think you were nuts? Like how did it come about that you're like, man, I want to go and I want to like be with soldiers in combat?
Right.
Do I call the Pentagon? How do I get this rolling?
Yeah, I mean, I'd done a little bit of that in the early 90s. I was in Idaho on some hotshot crews. They're fighting these big fires. I was really interested in wildland fire. And myself, I would have loved to have been on a hotshot crew. I just didn't know the sort of from the East Coast where I live, the bureaucracy, like trying to figure out how to do that just on a bureaucratic level was almost impossible. And so I ended up reporting on them, spent quite a lot of time out there. So I was a sort of participant, a journalist in some situations before that. But, my first war was in 1993.
Well, hold on, back up for one sec. When you were doing the fire stuff, though, did they really let you get in there, or was it too? They did. Okay.
Oh yeah.
I didn't know if it was like if it'd be like sort of too easy to constrain someone and keep them out of harm's way for.
No, they just put me on a helicopter and dropped me in.
Is that right?
Yeah. It was amazing. And I mean, with I had absolutely no credentials or anything. I mean, I just showed up.
Oh, it's refreshing to hear that someone didn't be like, no, you stay here.
It was the early 90s, right? I don't, maybe different now, but I showed up. I was like, hey, I'm interested in writing about wildland fire, and could you get me on a crew? And the next thing I knew, I was in a helicopter. They dropped me off with a shot crew up in the mountains north of Idaho, north of Boise.
Was
it
a
huge fire? Yeah.
Was the process a lot different becoming a war correspondent? Like, was there certain training you had to go through, or like security clearances? And
well, most wars don't involve the U.S. military. In most wars in the world, right? So there isn't a government agency involved in whether you can go to Sierra Leone.
See. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, I covered civil wars in West Africa. I was in Afghanistan in 1996. I watched the Taliban take over. I was with the in Kabul.
Because you interviewed Ahmad,
Massoud, yes.
Yeah.
Ahmad Shah Massoud.
And he was killed. He was killed by later interviewers.
Yeah, I interviewed him. I spent 2 months with him and his forces in Badakhshan in the fall of 2000. And I was with his commanders when they liberated Kabul after 9/11. And
God, that's incredible, man.
Yeah. It's amazing. So the U.S. government has nothing to do with that decision of yours to go seek out Massoud and spend a couple of months with him fighting the Taliban in northern Afghanistan. They have nothing to do with it, right? And so I wasn't embedded with U.S. forces until 2005 was the first time. So most of my war reporting has not been with U.S. forces.
It's just been you try to get closer until you're in it.
Yeah, so I was, my first war was Sarajevo in 1993, besieged by the Bosnian Serbs. It was I would say, I mean, I'm showing my sympathies here, but I would say it was quite similar to Russia and Ukraine, except on a much smaller scale, right? It's not Russia and Ukraine, it's the Bosnian Serbs in Bosnia. But the same sort of awful shelling of civilians. They besieged Sarajevo. It was an ethnically driven conflict, sort of a nationalistic conflict and grotesquely violent. And I managed to convince a magazine editor I knew at a magazine called Men's Journal, which is back in the day a pretty good magazine. And he gave me a sort of letter of passage, like Sebastian is working on a piece for us, which wasn't even true, for the civil war in Bosnia, and please help him in any way you can. I just showed that to some UN guy, and he gave me a UN press pass, and the next thing I knew, I was on a relief flight into Sarajevo, and then boom, there I was. It was no credentials from anybody, right? But there were a lot of freelancers in Sarajevo who made their bones. I mean, it sort of learned the craft because they just put themselves in that situation. They started freelancing radio, newspaper. I went there. Basically, the girlfriend I was living with in Gloucester dumped me, and I was,
I'll show her.
I so totally. Right. So I was sort of heartbroken and like, oh, you mean I can do anything I want right now? Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Right. So it's that heady mix of heartbreak and liberation. You know what I mean? It's sort of an interesting moment in your life. And so I went to Sarajevo, and there was a lot of other freelancers like me, and I would say 80% of them were young males, like I was. And I would say 80% of those guys had just been dumped by their girlfriend. Like,
sorry.
I was going to say there's a book, My War Gone By, I Miss It So.
Yeah, I met him. I met him in Bosnia in '93.
I mean, I remember reading that. Probably read that 15 or so years ago. But yeah, it was a very similar story. I mean, it's like in hotel rooms and yeah.
He was probably dumped by his girlfriend also.
Yeah, he seemed like it.
It was 17 years ago this summer that I first decided I didn't want to die. Okay. And I realized when I topped my last big tree.
Yeah.
And that thing, when you relieve that top load, it really bucks. Like bucks huge. And I used to I liked it.
Right.
Was indifferent to it, didn't think about it. And I was like, man, I don't want to. Yeah. I climbed down to that tree, never I changed my behaviors, and I was getting married that summer. But you have to go do what you did. Like tree climb is one thing, but to go do what you did and like go into Afghanistan during the Civil War, for a lot of people, having an American captive is really cool. Yeah. And then being able to like kill an American captive is very enticing, right? It's like you had to kind of have been like, I mean, I don't want to sound like like you had like it's like a mental issue, but you had to be like kind of indifferent to death.
No, I wasn't indifferent to death, but I felt like I was taking calculated risks that were manageable. Like I would never have gone into Syria. I mean, Syria, there was an open market for Western, right? So when
Afghanistan didn't feel that way when you were there.
No, I mean, I was with Massoud and the Northern Alliance, and there were absolutely zero issues with them about. They were my hosts and my protectors, right? I mean,
well, but he was also blown up.
Yeah, of course. I mean, right, but I don't,
including people around him,
right? But it's not like they would have seized me and decided to cut my head off, right? I mean, I was among people. I mean, I was there to report on frankly, the tragedy and the outrage of what the Taliban, backed by Pakistan, were doing to the Afghan people, right? I mean, and they were the Northern Alliance and Massoud were fully on board with the fact that someone from the Western press had come in to shine a spotlight on this. So I was they felt protected. They would have died protecting me, right? Yeah. I mean, seriously, not true in West Africa. West Africa was a lot scarier. Even the indigenous forces that I was with, I didn't trust them because they were traumatized child soldiers all high on drugs. So, there were a lot of variables that were terrifying, and I had some incredibly scary situations with them.
What would you categorize, like when you say that, like what would be the kind of scenario or situation you'd be in that you would categorize as scary? Because I think most people would find that every moment was scary, just to be in the proximity of shelling, to be in the proximity of war.
Well, I've been shelled plenty, and that's very scary. I mean, I've been shot at. I mean, lots of things have happened, but I think the two scariest moments I think were moments where I thought I was going to be executed, right? And both of them were in West Africa. One was in Sierra Leone. I was coming back from a frontline fight back towards Freetown, and with a couple of government soldiers and a couple of journalists. And a group of rebels stepped out of the jungle and stopped us on this deserted road. And 2 weeks later, they wiped out 2 cars full of journalists on the same road, like right near where we were. These same guys stopped us, and they had their rifles, their machine guns leveled, and they were arguing with each other. We were in an open Jeep, and they were arguing with each other, seemed to be arguing with each other about whether to kill us all or not. And we just sat, there was nothing we could do. We just sort of sat there. And at one point, one of them leveled his rifle at us to fire, and another guy grabbed the barrel and jerked it upward so it wouldn't.
Oh my God, man!
So I had for about 10 or 15 minutes, I was thinking this really could go down, right? And it was the extraordinary feeling. I became sort of I dissociated, right? I mean, my body sort of went numb, and I was so scared that I wasn't even scared anymore. It's like I wasn't there. And the psychological effect, and then they didn't shoot us, and I don't know why, right? And the psychological trauma of that is way worse than someone shooting at you from 300 meters and you manage to get behind some sandbags. I mean, that's child's play, right? Compared to, wow, we are totally screwed. And they could shoot us or not. And then a similar thing happened in Nigeria in 2006. I was seized by rebels, the Ijaw warriors who were fighting in a group called the Movement for the Emancipation of the Niger Delta, a partly criminal, partly righteous group. And they seized me in a small village in the creeks, the Niger River and in the Delta. And they accused me of being a spy. And one guy came up, sort of strutted up to me, machine gun. And these Ijaw warriors, they got feathers and paint and all kinds of fetishes on them, and they're wild looking guys, right? And really intense warriors. And he said, very matter of factly, he said, when we kill you later today, I'm going to be the one to do it. He didn't say it meanly. He was just, I just want you to know, just by way of introduction.
That's like Princess Bride. Yeah. Remember? The pirate, probably kill you in the morning.
Right. So I was just remember thinking, don't let your knees buckle. Like whatever you do, don't let your knees buckle. And so those two situations are.
Do you think he was just tormenting you?
I don't know what he was doing. There was a lot of, I don't know. There was a lot of aggression. There was a lot of sort of performative aggression. They didn't know who I was. Their commander eventually, they called their commander and put me on the phone with him on a cell phone, like 1 bar of signal. Like I was standing on top of a log trying to maintain my cell connection with him. And he was in South Africa, actually. He was an arms dealer and in South Africa, but indigenous Ijaw. And I talked with him and he said, okay, give the phone back to the guy who gave you the phone. And I didn't know what he was going to say. I was going to say, kill him or don't. And I gave the phone back and the guy said, okay, sir. Yes, sir. All right, we'll do it. And I didn't know what, and he shut the phone, flipped the phone. It was a flip phone. He flipped it closed and he said, it's going to be fine. We're going to let you go. But I didn't know until that moment that it would be fine. So they might have been bluffing. I mean, he might, I'm an American, right? I mean, there are repercussions for whacking an American.
That's what I was going to ask. Is there like any, is it like a myth that like being a member of like the American press affords you some degree of safety in those situations?
Well, I mean, it protects you with people that don't want to get on the wrong side of America. And the Ijaw, as badass as they are, probably don't want, the American military as an adversary. They have their hands full with the Nigerian military, right? So, but then there's groups like ISIS who make, the point of their existence is to fight America, to fight the infidel, to fight the West. So, it's like depends who you're talking about.
How different did it feel for you when it was when you got to a point and the global war on terror started, and all of a sudden it was like you were with like Americans?
Oh, it was so nice, right? Because I didn't have to worry that the people I was with were going to kill me, right? If I got wounded, I knew I'd be evacuated. Like I knew that these guys would do whatever they could to help me, and as I would them as I got to know them, right? I mean, I really. This one, so I spent, most embeds are a week or two, right? But I spent a year off and on with one platoon, which was like 30, 40 guys at this remote outpost called Restrepo. It was named after the platoon medic who was killed, basically at the bottom of the hill. And so I really became part of that platoon and enjoyed the profound comfort of being part of a group. I mean, a really ancient and pretty much a way that's been pretty much lost to our society here at home. I felt like, wow, I belong to this thing. And they would risk their lives for me, and I know I would for them, and here we are. Let's get it done, and it was absolutely extraordinary. And so that experience really changed me, right? I mean, I feel like in our society, we don't get to enjoy that group affiliation in such a profound way. And it is what our evolutionary past consists of, right? That we're social primates. We survived not because we're rugged individuals, but because we affiliate very well. And when we're in groups like that, the individuals in them will risk their lives or give their lives to protect the group. It's like firemen or something, right? And that's our evolutionary past. And when you find yourself in a situation like that, it is almost intoxicating. It plays to so much evolutionary wiring. It plays to so many profound human emotions. And I just kept thinking, this is all I want. Like, I don't want to go home. Why would I want to do that? Like, it was quite extraordinary.
And that was a group of what size then?
30 guys or so.
Yeah.
I mean, so 30 to 50 people, as the anthropologists will tell you, is the typical group size in our evolutionary past, right? So the groups of about that size that are affiliated by clan or by tribe with other groups around that size, but the sort of survival community is about that size. And it's sort of a perfect size. It's the largest number that you can have quite close emotional relationships with. And you can't be emotionally close to 500 dudes, right? It's not happening, right? Even if you're in the same battalion, that's a rather abstract knowledge, right? But 30, 40 people, you're like, wow, these are my people. What wouldn't I do for them, right? And of course, in our evolutionary past, it wouldn't be all one sex. It wouldn't be all male. It would be a mix, right? It would be a mix of old and young, male and female, et cetera. And what wouldn't you do with your family? What wouldn't you do to protect them? Like nothing. You would do anything to protect them, right? Feeling that way about 30 or 40 people, that is the human experience in evolutionary terms. And it's the loss of that experience for most people in modern society is a tragic one.
The other day we had some anthropologists here, and they were excavating. They had been working on an excavation of an Ice Age encampment in Wyoming. Okay, so these are like mammoth hunters,
Right.
and we were talking about, well, how big was the encampment? Then he's like 30, 40 people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no,
Ice Age, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's,
There's a thing I've been like, you should feel free as we're talking. I would, I appreciate that you're not doing this, but I appreciate the impulse. Please tie into the books.
oh yeah, sure.
Like what you're talking about now is your book Tribe.
Yes,
Yeah,
right,
so,
exactly. Yeah, I wrote a book. Right, I wrote a book, Tribe, about.
That's not what you're talking about, but these ideas are explored in
Yeah, that's right. No, I was trying to figure out, why does this modern society, which is so safe and so affluent, have such high rates of mental illness? Depression and anxiety, suicide, addiction. Why was it that along the American frontier, at its various points in Pennsylvania and Ohio and further west, all the way to Texas and Arizona, like why were pioneers constantly sort of absconding into native society and disappearing in native society, and the natives didn't do the opposite. And what it really seemed to be, and Benjamin Franklin wrote about this, because of course, if you're like a good Christian, the idea that like white Christians would rather live with what they called the savages, like it flies in the face of the entire sense of Western superiority, right? And Benjamin Franklin wrote letters about this, like, what is the appeal? Like, and the appeal is that those kinds of organic hunter-gatherer societies are extremely egalitarian. The leadership is not imposed; it's granted by the people. I mean, all these sort of like democratic ideals that we do not live up to actually are acted out in societies of that scale. And there's community. There's community, really close community, and of course, if you're a young man, instead of having to plow fields all day, you can go hunting. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's not to like, sort of.
Yeah.
And so that was the genesis of my thought that maybe what people are really drawn to is close connection to each other, and that's why the soldiers that I was with, against all apparent logic, they missed being at Restrepo. They got back to their girlfriends and their families and bars and everything, all the things young men like. It's like, whoa. I mean, a number of them said to me, if we could take a helicopter back to Restrepo right now and do another year out there, we would do it.
Yeah.
And that's how, so my book Tribe was about that phenomenon.
We recently had a guy on, a guy named Pastor Shane Yates, who's sitting right in that chair, and he was talking about coming home from Iraq. No, coming home from, I think it was in Afghanistan, coming home from Afghanistan. Was that where it was? When it was the kids like eating, he's like, you're literally watching children looking in the garbage for food,
Yeah.
competing with dogs
Yeah.
in the streets. And he said, and like, you get home so fast.
Yeah.
And also you're just home. And he's standing there and there's a woman arguing with a Starbucks employee
Yeah.
about the state of her latte. And he's like, I wanted to kill her.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's talking about just the hard, like the very difficult adjustment. But there's this thing I've been, and think about what you're talking about and the ideas that you explore in Tribe. There's like, I'm kind of struggling with this thing I'm seeing happen lately. I'm just becoming aware of it. And it's very troubling to me about American culture where when you're on the internet, if you solely relied on the internet, you would get a view of American culture that does not at all match the view of American culture that you have as you're alive being an American outside of the web.
Right.
Meaning, any one of my neighbors would, if my house was on fire,
Right.
any one of my neighbors would go into my house to get my kids.
Right.
I would go into any one of my neighbors' houses to get their kids.
Yeah.
When I say this, I'm not like, I have no idea of the political affiliation.
Right.
Except for one of my neighbors, I have no idea
Yeah.
of their political affiliation. Zero. But like, you get this, I used to think of, people think of the radical right and the radical left as being like diametrically opposed. I'm starting to view it more like that these are just symptoms of an ailment.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like you could have a certain ailment and you might get like stunning headaches, or you might have a certain ailment and other people would have the same ailment and that they can't get a full breath or whatever, or all the weird shit that would happen to people with COVID. Yeah. It's like too much time online is the thing.
Yeah.
And then the symptoms are you could be radicalized in one direction, you're radicalized in another direction. You're like, you wind up being that you're just bound by what you hate.
Yeah.
Like your culture is, my people that I find are people that hate what I hate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And that's my team. And dude, and like the part where you're talking about is like, that need like build a team that's not based on just that you all hate the same shit.
Right. Well, in evolutionary terms, outrage is a powerful unifier, because you're unified with other people who are outraged by the same thing, and it creates a sort of pugilistic state of mind that's good at defending itself. So you think in evolutionary terms, that anger and outrage response is a very effective defense against the threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the algorithms that are used in social media are very good at generating outrage. It's harder for algorithms to generate the more subtle but also very important feelings of love or sadness or regret. There's sort of gentler emotions that also are really important for keeping society and people glued together, right? Shared value, a shared warmth with each other. Even though those are hard, they don't have the algorithms for that. The algorithms for hatred are very, very simple. There's a threat over there. We have to unify. We have to denounce the threat and unify against it, and then we'll survive, right? So you're going into very, very ancient human history when you gin up those emotions. And, it used to be that at the town hall, someone might stand, before the internet, right? Before the apocalypse of the internet came along. You got, the town hall, and someone would stand up with a different view about, paving the streets or whatever. And you'd be like, okay, I'm totally against that. But that's Joe. I know I have a relationship with Joe. And I don't agree with them. And I might even end up shouting at him. But we're all in this together. We all live in this little, that's gone, right? And so you can hate on people online and there are no repercussions. The person is not going to come grab you by the shirt front and say, do not speak to me like that in front of my community or in front of my family. You're not in any danger, right? You're free to be a sort of cowardly adversary. And that's very seductive to a lot of people. And so I don't, the internet's a great tool for all kinds of things.
Sure.
But I don't, I have a flip phone because I think the smartphones are just like killing people, literally killing people. It was a deliberate addiction designed by the tech companies, right? It's a very powerful addiction. It's particularly powerful with our children. and I think it's destroying the society. I just refuse to participate in it.
Yeah, man, it's tough because like I use the internet to find out how the internet's destroying society because I'm into this thing right now. It's like American Veterans Institute. It's like interviews with World War II veterans. They've been very good. Like when these guys, they kind of were catching all these dudes in their 80s, 90s.
I've seen some of those. Amazing.
It's like I was telling my wife the other day. I'm sitting there on a Saturday morning. I'm sitting there doing some work, and I got one of those playing. And I was like, I said, this is gonna sound so nostalgic, but holy shit, we've fallen.
Yeah.
Far.
Yeah.
Like listening to interview after interview after interview with these guys about, they all kind of start like, where were you when Pearl Harbor was attacked?
Right.
And the portraits they paint.
Yeah.
There's this Italian dude, and he says like he goes down to a gas station or something to buy a soda, you know, and everybody's in the gas stations listening because Pearl Harbor just got attacked. He goes home. His dad listens to the address from Franklin Roosevelt, calls his 4 sons down into the room, informs them, you will all fight. He goes, we moved to this country. We have a house and a car.
Yeah.
This country cannot fail.
Yeah.
And he says when he goes to the train station, his dad makes a point that his dad wants to drive him alone to the train station. So he's expecting some kind of lecture. His dad never says a word to him all the drive. They get to the train station, and you know what his dad says to him? He says to him in Italian, don't do anything that will cause me to hang my head in shame.
Wow.
that was it, dude. Out the door, and I'm like, I don't know, man, I just get nostalgic about it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I feel like something's corroding. Like, I have this terrible anxiety about culture right now with like the internet hatred.
Yeah. I mean, I still, you know, we're still all human, and I think that those same noble sentiments and actions, individuals today are just as capable of them, right? But what's not gone, but what's in danger, what's under threat, is the idea of a nation that is unified, that thinks of itself as a nation despite its internal differences. Right. I love that there's Republicans and Democrats. I happen to be a Democrat, but I don't care. Whatever. I mean, that's great. That that it's the country's. My father's a refugee from 2 wars. He's an immigrant, right? And the country's made up of people like my dad, right? And I was born in this country. Whatever. It's all great. So the idea that we're all unified in this American project is an incredibly powerful one, right? And it should transcend all these other divisions, including left and right. And I think one of the problems right now is that the internet, and look, I have a laptop, I'm online, I research stuff, I get it. I just don't have a smartphone because I don't want that following me around all day and being where my brain disappears when I have 30 seconds to spare while I'm waiting for the bus. Like that to me is horrible, right, for the brain. But I think we've sort of lost sight of the idea that there's the ultimate category we're all in is American.
Right? That's as a patriot, that's what I'm getting worried about increasingly. Right. Was it your quote, or were you quoting somebody when you said that journalists, I can't remember if you said should or shouldn't, or it's not should or do or whatever, but like journalists don't tell you what to think.
Right. Journalists don't tell you what to I was paraphrasing someone else who was actually talking about theater. Which is interesting, right? But I repurposed it for journalism. Is journalists don't tell you what to think; they tell you what to think about. And if a journalist is telling you what to think, how to think, they're not a journalist. Yeah. Don't listen. Turn it off.
They're a commentator,
right?
They're an analyst or commentator.
Yeah. Worse than an analyst. Like we need analysts. They're
commentator.
They're a commentator. Yeah. And so I feel like the internet has. And there are political forces in this country that are depending on the ability to fracture people in order to achieve their agenda and also make money. I mean, you can sort of monetize this, right? And what they're sacrificing, maybe not deliberately and consciously, but ultimately what's happening is they are sacrificing the cultural and political unity of this country for smaller gains, for smaller personal gains, including many politicians who do that.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about your health scare, man.
Yeah,
I've
sure.
never heard of that.
Yeah, me neither. Till it happened to me.
Isn't that funny? We're going through that with my boy right now. My little boy has a thing that like not any person in our social circle has ever heard of.
Yeah, right.
Like a cartilage issue,
Yeah, right.
You got to be careful here, Steve, because you might get your thing where you think you're developing a problem because he talks about it.
Yeah, I have this. Like, if someone's telling me like whatever, any problem someone tells you, especially internal.
Oh yeah.
Like you're like, yeah, I got a whatever in my kidney. I'm like, oh, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Now I got a weird feeling in my kidney.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sort of paranoia is very human, and it helps keep us alive, right? Once in a while, someone does have a weird thing in their kidney, and they weren't aware of it until someone mentioned it, and they go to the doctor and say, so there is a sort of use for that. But no, so basically, what happened to me, I have a ligament in the wrong place, my median arcuate ligament, which sort of goes across your abdomen about where your sternum is.
I wouldn't know you had I guess you do have a ligament in your abdomen.
Yeah, and it crosses right near the bottom of your rib cage, crosses your abdomen, and mine is too tight, so it's called median arcuate ligament syndrome. It has crushed the celiac artery. Now, the celiac artery is like a garden hose that irrigates all of your organs with blood, right? You imagine how big it is. And it comes right out of
I don't want to. I have this thing I'm trying to do where when someone's telling me something I don't understand,
Yep.
The impulse is going,
I'm trying to picture it when I'm cutting a deer open where it would be.
Like, I don't understand.
So the celiac comes out of the aorta and the descending aorta, and it branches down, and it brings blood to the liver and the intestines and the stomach and all the organs in your abdomen, right? So a lot of blood goes through the celiac. If you block it with a ligament,
so this ligament is like on the outside,
pushing it down,
binding in,
right? And it's
like
just
crimping it off, or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just an irregularity. It isn't because I led a bad life and am filled with cholesterol. Whatever. It's nothing like that, right? It's just a sort of bad design, right?
Yep.
It's very rare. But what the body does, because the body is a walking miracle, is it's like, okay, we still got to get the blood to where it needs to go. There's a lot of sort of redundancy in the vascular system. So the blood flows to where it needs to go through smaller arteries, these branch arteries, that are not designed to take that kind of blood flow, right? That kind of pressure. So what they do is they dilate so that they can carry all this blood they're not supposed to take. It works fine, right? They're meant to dilate, but if there's a weak spot in one of the arteries, instead of dilating, it will bubble out or balloon outwards. That's called an aneurysm. Okay?
Yep.
And the artery wall will balloon outwards, and it will get bigger over the course of decades. So there's no symptoms. It's very hard to detect, and it very slowly gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when it ruptures, and it will, when it ruptures, you are suddenly you're bleeding out from an artery. You know, an arterial bleed is deadly, right? Mm-hmm. You're bleeding out from an artery, a smaller artery, into your own abdomen. So if someone stabbed you in the stomach and you made it alive to the hospital, the doctors don't have anything to figure out. They're like, oh, we know what the problem is.
There's blood coming out of a hole in there.
Yeah, exactly. They know where to stick their finger, almost literally, to stop the bleed. Like there's no mystery there. With internal hemorrhage, it could be anywhere, right? And so this happened 5 years ago, and it was during.
But you know when the blood's coming out.
Well, I didn't know that's what was happening, but I felt a lot of pain, right? But I'm an old stoic.
It's like high pressure blood.
Yeah, well, I mean, blood's an irritant when it's not in the vascular system.
So that's what's causing the pain.
Yeah, so I'm like, there's blood around my kidneys and around my liver, and it just like feels awful. It's very, very painful.
All of a sudden.
Yeah, in mid-sentence, it ruptured. So I mean,
What were you talking? What was the sentence?
Yeah, right. Right. I'm going to live forever. I think this is the sentence. So it was during COVID, and so I have two little girls that are now 8 and 5. At the time, they were 3 years old and 6 months, and my wife, and it was during COVID, and we own a property in Massachusetts that's very remote. It's in the woods at the end of a dead-end dirt road. There's no cell phone coverage there. The landlines are old, and when it rains, they short out, so there's no landlines. We're surrounded by government land. It's just basically paradise, right? It's an old house from 1800. And we were there during COVID. And I'd built a post and beam cabin deeper in the woods. And one day we managed, some teenage girls who lived up the road that we knew called. When does this ever happen? They called and said, hey, we're free this afternoon. Would you like some babysitting time? Right? And we were like, yes, we pay $1,000 an hour. Like, how long can you stay? Right? Yeah. So they came over a few hours, and my wife and I went out to this beautiful little cabin. It's totally off the grid, like oil lamp, wood stove. I built it myself. So we're in this place of peace and beauty, and just sort of enjoying our a couple of hours of alone time, and all of a sudden there's this pain in my abdomen. Like, oh, what was that? And it wouldn't stop. And so I stood up to sort of work it out. I thought it was some crazy indigestion, and I almost fell over. And what was happening was I was bleeding out in my abdomen. My blood pressure was tanking, and I was graying out, right? And I sat back down. I said to my wife, I'd never thought I'd have to ever say these words to anyone. I said, I think I'm going to need some help. And, I was a marathon runner when I was young. I was a really good competitive runner. I've always been very fit, very healthy. I just never thought that I would need physical help from anybody. It just like never. And now my wife's dragging me out of the woods, like literally dragging me down a trail to get me to help. And we finally there was no cell phone.
Did she have one of those like mysterious bursts of power?
Well, I got, she didn't, I had my arm over her shoulder. I wasn't unconscious, but I was sort of half.
Oh, I thought she was like pulling you.
No, yeah, right. The car off the baby. No, not quite. So the ambulance came, it took him 20 minutes to get there. I'm losing a pint of blood maybe every 10 or 15 minutes into my abdomen.
But all in you.
All in me. And you can lose about half your blood before you die. And we live an hour from the hospital. So you can do the math. Like I was a human hourglass. And the ambulance got there, and I sort of rebooted it. Then you go into compensatory shock. So your body, it's extraordinary. Your body knows when there's a 5-alarm fire, even if you don't, right? I didn't know I was dying. I had no idea, right? And so it cuts off circulation to the parts of your body that you don't need to survive. Your surface areas, your skin, your legs, your arms, and it pools it in your brain and in your abdomen, in your heart, around your heart. So when it does that, your blood pressure goes back up, and I became sort of clear-minded again. So the ambulance guys got there. They were like, it's a hot day. You're probably dehydrated, sir. They're looking at me. I'm 58. They're like, you're an old man. They're in their 20s, right?
Yeah.
Like
the
you're
old dehydration thing, man.
Yeah. And why don't you sit in the shade and drink some water and call us if you still don't feel well? And my wife,
oh my God,
my wife said, you're taking him to the hospital. Like he couldn't walk a few minutes ago.
Like I've seen thirsty people.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And he was not acting thirsty.
In my mind, at the time, I remember thinking, I've always heard that married men live longer. This is why. I'm seeing it right now. So
yeah, because your wife's always like, well, why don't you see somebody about it?
Right. So they put me in, and they started the long drive, and my compensatory shock held for most of the drive. And right when we got to the hospital,
and they've got no idea what's going on.
None.
They didn't like check your vitals and see that something was.
Well, they did. So the thing is, if you have internal bleeding, your heart tries to compensate for the drop in blood pressure by beating faster, which pressurizes the system. Right, you run the pump,
so
and you pressurize the pipes.
Okay.
Right, except I'm very fit. So they looked at my heart rate, and it was probably in the 80s. They're like, all right, he's almost 60 years old. His heart rate's in the 80s. That's pretty normal.
Got it.
Right? My heart rate's 55. So they didn't know I was 30 beats up. Had they known that, they would like, oh, this is a classic symptom for internal hemorrhage. But my fitness level was masking it. Right. So they were totally cavalier about it. Right. We almost stopped for coffee practically, oh
my gosh.
And we got to the hospital, and I just went off a cliff. Your body decompensates. It has to decompensate at some point. And I went into end stage hemorrhagic shock. I'm convulsing with hypothermia, and they rushed me into the trauma bay. The doctors know immediately what's going on. And they diagnosed me immediately and sent me through a CAT scan. They saw where the blood was pooling, so I'm in the trauma bay, and
I just want to mention something. What you were just describing. Did you say hype? Like, what'd you say?
Hemorrhagic shock. So is that?
No, you said something about hypothermia.
Oh yeah, you go into hypothermia when you're in hemorrhagic shock. Your body gets hypothermic.
I don't understand that. Why is that?
It's as if you're very, very cold.
Yeah.
Your body can't keep up its internal temperature,
Oh.
right? Which is
Did you? I guess when you're super hypothermic, you don't know you're cold. I mean, did you feel like a cold sensation?
Yeah, well, I was convulsing. I mean, I was having like these spastic shivering. Like,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. No, I didn't know what was going on, but I kind of sensed it wasn't good. I didn't know I was dying. I mean, there's a lot of...
But you knew it was a cold feeling.
Well, yes, I was shaking. I've only shaken like that when I was very, very cold, and I've never even convulsively shaked.
Huh.
Right.
Wow,
right.
man.
Shaken, whatever it is. So I knew there's a lot of, when you're dying, there's a lot of denial. I had no idea I was dying, but I was like, okay, I was going blind a while ago. I couldn't talk, and now I'm convulsively shaking, but I'm fine. Like, like there.
Just need a Gatorade.
Yeah, exactly. So it never crossed my mind. Of course, everyone else knew, and they,
So they were able to look at what's going on because it would never occur to me like perhaps they're having internal bleeding. Like they're good enough where they're like this dude is having a
I had all this. I had all the symptoms, right?
And they recognized,
and then they saw it on the CT scan, and so my blood pressure was 60/40. Right, I'd lost half my blood at that point. I was probably 10 minutes from dead. Right, I needed 10 units of blood to stay alive, which is basically a full oil change. Like,
how do they get the old blood out? They pump it out.
No, it's in your abdomen, and then it takes a few months to be reabsorbed by your body if you survive.
Oh, so they don't try to get it out.
No, it's not doing it. They got
a
their
Capri
hands.
Sun pouch deal.
Right. No, that they don't. That doesn't matter. Like they
I didn't know that.
they don't need to worry about that. But so I was probably 10 minutes from dead, right? And they put me in the trauma bay, and a doctor starts prepping my neck to insert a large gauge needle through my neck into my jugular to transfuse me because I need a lot of blood fast, right? And he asked my permission to do this, and I still didn't get it. I was like, you mean in case there's an emergency? He was like, this is the emergency right now. If you say so, my wife seemed worried also, but if I, whatever, do what you got to do. And I'm lying there while he's working on my neck, and all of a sudden, and I have to stop and just explain, I'm an atheist, right? My dad was an atheist and a physicist. Just like atheist.
They kind of go hand in hand a little bit.
Well, yeah. Well, it's sort of atheist squared, right? Like hyper rational. And I'm a lifelong atheist. So you need to know this for what I'm about to say because it flew in the face of a lot of my understanding of reality, of understanding of life in the world a little bit. So beneath me and to my left, this sort of yawning blackness opened up, like the universe had sort of cracked open into this just infinite black void, and I was getting pulled into it. And I didn't want to go. I was like a wounded animal. Like I wasn't thinking about my family. I didn't know I was dying. I just didn't want to go into the vast darkness, right? Like when you take your dog to the vet and the dog doesn't want to go to I was like that, like, no, I'm not going in there. And I was getting pulled in and I couldn't stop it. And I was panicking. And then above me to my left, suddenly appeared my dead father. He'd been dead 8 years, and he was there in this just energy form. Like it wasn't even quite vision that I used to perceive him. Like it was a sense that's not familiar to me, but it was absolutely like, oh, there's my dad. Like, what is he doing? He was very benevolent, and he was communicating with me. He was hovering right above me, and he was communicating with me, basically, you don't have to fight it. You can come with me. I'll take care of you. He was very, very paternal and loving and caring. And, he was a physicist. He was, I realized later, on the spectrum. He was not a particularly emotional person, right? I loved him, but my connection to him was not visceral and loving in that way that he was at that moment. Like it was in some ways the most loving, sort of viscerally loving thing he'd ever done for me, right? In that moment. It's like, I'll take care of you. And I was horrified. I was like, you're dead. Why would I go with you? I'm alive. The party's over here. Like, what are you doing here? I mean, I was shocked and horrified, almost offended that he would think I would want to go with him and not want to stay alive with my family. I was really offended. I was like, what do you think? And I said to the doctor, you got to hurry. I'm going.
I was going to ask you if you were aware that you were conscious or not.
Yeah. I was talking to the doctor, and then there was my dad, and I said to the doctor, he was right over here. I said, "You got to hurry. I'm going right now. I'm being taken."
Oh, did the hole in your dad seem like diametric?
They were connected to each other. He was like, "Don't be." Sort of. He didn't say this, but he was basically, "Don't be scared of what's happening right now."
Oh, so it wasn't different directions.
No. Well, he was there. The pit was above me. He was up there. But basically, he was saying, "You don't have to." I was fighting going into the hole.
Yeah.
And he was like, "You don't have to fight it. I'll be with you. I'll take care of you. It's okay.
I'll accompany you into the
yeah." And they eventually
and you're still talking to this doctor.
Yeah. Yep. And they couldn't sedate me because my vital signs were too low. So everything that they did, they had to do with me fully conscious. I had a little bit of fentanyl, but it didn't do anything. I was in a huge amount of pain. And they brought me into the interventional radiology suite, and which is this IR is this sort of like magic, basically. Like you're on a fluoroscope, which is an X-ray machine that takes real-time video, and they pop a hole in your groin and they thread a wire up your femoral artery, and they can snake it around to any part of your body. So instead of, if they need to put a stent in your aorta, they can put it in by wire instead of opening your heart up, right? It's amazing what they can do. And they were trying to get the wire to the ruptured artery to embolize it, to block it, so I would stop bleeding. And the alternative to doing that, this is what they would have had to do 20 years ago, is like cut me open and try to find the bleed before I bled out, right? And the outcomes are terrible for that. And if they'd had to do that, they would have brought my wife in to say goodbye. They told me that later. Like, we would have brought her in to say goodbye because you probably wouldn't have made it. So they were trying and trying with this wire to thread its way through my sort of weird vasculature, because the ligament totally contorted all my vasculature when it compensated, right? And they couldn't get the wire to the place. And I was on the fluoroscope for hours. And now it's 2 a.m, and I remember the doctors giving up, right? And I remember them, one of them shrugged. He was like, "Well, we tried. We did everything we could." And now I finally realized that I might die. Like, I didn't know it until then.
And during this, they're pumping blood to you and you're just bleeding it out. It's kind of like...
Yeah, that's right. And also, you can't just replace blood without consequences, right? I mean, you can die from blood loss with a full complement of blood in you, but blood from other people. And there's a chemical process that gets going when you experience extreme blood loss that they can't, it's called acidosis, and they can't get ahead of it, and it will kill you. So I was right at the edge of where that process would start, right? And so I was barely hanging on. The nurse was there holding my hand, and that human contact was so important. I mean, literally important for survival, right? You need the doctors, the mechanics, but you also need some, because it's very lonely. Dying is, being a patient in a hospital is extremely lonely, right? Everyone's masked, there's very bright lights, you don't know what's going on. And to this nurse, she was holding my hand. She was like, "Breathe with me. It's okay. Keep your eyes open. I'm right here." And she was my like lifeline. And one of the reasons I survived, and I shouldn't have survived, the doctors didn't think I would, and they're sort of amazed that I did. But one of the reasons I survived was that human connection, along with amazing medical care.
Did she have a glove on, or it was skin?
I don't remember. I think it was skin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think it was skin. Yeah. It was just absolutely crucial. And so I watched the doctors give up, and I was like, "Oh my God, I'm not going to make it." And I thought I was just in for belly pain. What's going on, right? I had no idea. And then the doctor said, "Why don't we try going through his left wrist?" And the other doctor was like, "Wow, I like the way you think that." And so, because of my weird vasculature, that was a different angle of attack that the IR guy, thought might work, and it did. And he saved my life. And, he'd been called from dinner an hour away and had driven to the hospital to save my life. Like, I mean, what these doctors do is just amazing. Like, he was on call, so they brought me up to the ICU, then they sedated me, they put me under, and, I was in this sort of wild darkness for like 100 years or something. Like, I felt like I was gone for a very long time. And then the next thing I knew, I heard this really intense Boston accent, a woman speaking so this is on Cape Cod in Massachusetts, right? You all know the Boston accent, not the loveliest accent on the planet, right? Pretty harsh.
You said that,
yeah.
not us.
Yeah. It's pretty harsh accent, right? And just this woman speaking a really intense Boston accent, and I'm still in darkness, right? My eyes are closed. And I'm like, where am I? Like, they probably don't have these accents anywhere you want to go later, right? Might not be a good sign.
Guy's
right?
getting mean.
So I opened my eyes and she said, "Congratulations, Mr. Junger, you made it. You almost died last night. No one thought you were going to make it. You're kind of a miracle." And I was like, "Well, that's some straight shooting info right there, right?" And I was shocked. I had no idea I'd almost died, right? I was absolutely shocked. It's quite traumatic to find that out, right? Particularly if you have young kids. I was absolutely shocked. Then she left because she was doing her rounds. And I'm a mess. I'm throwing up blood. I got wires coming out all over the place. I'm a total mess. And I couldn't stop thinking about what she told me. And she came back and she said, "How you doing?" I said, "Well, not that great, actually. Like, what you said is terrifying. I had no idea I'd almost died, and I can't stop thinking about it." And she said the wisest thing I think just about anyone has ever said to me. She said, "Try this. Instead of thinking about it like something scary, try thinking about it like something sacred." And she walked out. I later tried to find her, 2 weeks later, to find her, to thank her, and ask her what did she mean, because I made my own use of that advice, right? I'm an atheist. The word sacred is a very important word to me, and for me it means anything that helps preserve human dignity. Like, that's a sacred task. It might be a school teacher, it might be a shrink, it might be a nurse, it might be a minister. Sacred work happens in church as well, right? So anything that preserves human dignity. And as a journalist, on our best days, we bring back information that our country, the world, can use responsibly to help alleviate human suffering. That's a sacred job. On our best days, that's like sacred work, right? So I thought, I've been going to front lines my whole life. I stopped after my buddy Tim was killed in Libya. I went to the ultimate front line, my own mortality. I was allowed to come back. Did I come back with sacred information that would help myself and others face the terrifying prospect of our mortality? We're all going to face it. Do I have sacred information from this? That's the meaning I took, right? But I circled back to ask her, this wonderful woman, like, what did you mean by that? And I couldn't find her. And not only could I not find her, no one at the hospital, in the ICU, no one knew who I was talking about. Like, "Oh, there's no one here by that description." Like, what? She totally disappeared. And she might have been I'm not getting all woo-woo here. Like, she might have been a visiting nurse and who knows, but I couldn't find her. And it contributed to what afterwards was a terrible sense of unreality. Like, I worried when I finally got home, I started to worry that I had died and that I was imagining everything. It was a dying hallucination, and I actually didn't survive. And
did that moment with your father in the darkness, did that like stick with you through that process? Or is that something that you came back to later? Or?
Yeah. I mean, as soon as this nurse said that to me, I remembered my dad. I was like, "Oh my God, I saw my father in the pit," and that stayed with me in sort of troubling ways. I mean, so I started researching NDEs, near-death experiences, right? They're very common. They happen all over the world. They're not infinitely varied, right? They fall into 3 or 4 basic buckets, one of them being that, the dead show up to either tell you to go back or help escort you across. And it's very, very common. It's every society in the world. It's quite a mystery. And I started researching NDEs, and there's some pretty good rational explanations rooted in medicine and neurochemistry for many of the visions that people have when they're on the threshold. I'm a rationalist, and I'm like, all right, that sort of makes sense. I get it. The tunnel, the out-of-body experience, you can do that with drugs. You can do that in a human centrifuge like fighter pilots undergo. The one thing that didn't quite make sense to me is the consistency of the vision, right? So the many, many people see the dead when they're dying in hospice, in ERs, it's a really, really common thing. And, if you give a room full of people LSD, they will all hallucinate. There's no mystery there. The chemistry of that is well known, but they won't all hallucinate the same thing. And what's odd about dying is the consistency of the hallucinations that they involve the dead, even people that don't know they're dying, even people who don't like the dead person who showed up, right? It's not a comforting vision necessarily. And that's the only part of this that really made me sort of wonder, like, do we really understand anything about reality? And I went into quantum physics to try to sort of understand, like, maybe the problem is that we think we live on a flat Earth and it's actually a globe. Maybe the problem is this boundary between life and death that we assume is absolute. Maybe it actually isn't the boundary we think it is. And, I hate the word afterlife. I think it's a misnomer and misleading. But there might be at some sort of quantum level a reality that we don't understand involving consciousness and life and death and time and all these sort of basic components of the universe. I don't know. I'm an atheist with questions, which is a huge step for an atheist. Or for a person of faith. Also, if you're a person of faith and have questions, that's also a huge step in the right direction.
There's this guy I knew that wrote me an email one time, and he was tipping over a tree. Here we are, chainsaws and trees again. Yeah. He was tipping over a tree, and the wind picked up, and he lives. Okay. And all of a sudden, the tree was going away he didn't anticipate. Yeah. And he tripped and fell.
Jeez, yeah.
And the tree landed on him, but he was in just enough of a depression where the tree didn't kill him. But it messed with him. So he had a thing like you just mentioned. He later went back. A few days later, he describes going back and looking into that hole.
Yeah.
He's in such a weird state mentally that he went back looking in that hole, half thinking that he would see himself in that hole. And he was so tripped up that he did what you said.
Yeah.
Where he's like, maybe I did die.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a weird spot.
Right.
And he went to look.
Yeah, in weird limbo.
Like he was it got that weird for him over those next few days.
I didn't know this, but it's really common. I talked to a woman who was rear-ended by a truck at a red light, and medically, she was hurt a little bit. She didn't have an NDE, but after that, she was just plagued with the fear that she had died in the accident and didn't know it. She was in limbo, and eventually would find. And so I had the same problem, and part of my problem was that, and I'm not woo-woo. I'm really not a mystic. I mean, I really am a rationalist, right? But our rationality doesn't understand everything, and that's where I have questions. But so the dawn of the day before, right before dawn, my family and I co-sleep, right? So my wife and I and our little girls sleep in the same area on the big pad on the floor. It's like we're camping basically, except at home, right? It's very, very nice. And I had a dream that I didn't know was a dream, at the time, but I had a dream that my family was below me, my wife and my two little girls, and they were crying. They were crying about me. And I was waving. I was like, I'm right here. It's okay. I'm like, and they couldn't see me. They couldn't hear me. And I was floating above them. And I was in this sort of darkness looking down at them. And I was made to understand that they couldn't see me or hear me because I was dead. I was a spirit. I had died, and that I was headed out, and there was no going back, and that's it. And I woke up in a panic. I mean, I woke up and then was shocked to realize that I wasn't dead. I mean, that's how real the dream was, right? And thank God that was just a dream. I was really shaken. And 36 hours later, I started dying, right? So when I started researching NDEs, another common NDE is that you're floating above the doctors, above your body, above your family.
I was going to ask about that, the bright light and the floating.
Yeah. So I started researching NDEs. And again, the rationalist explanations for most of it, I kind of buy, right? And
what are they?
Oh, that, it's the brain is being traumatized by low blood oxygen, and it releases endorphins, and you can hallucinate, brains hallucinate during times of stress. I mean, there's all these just sort of neurochemical explanations that do a pretty good job at explaining most of the phenomena of NDEs. Not the visions of the dead. The specificity of that can't be explained by low blood oxygen, right? And only the dying seem to see the dead. And but another common experience is sort of floating above your loved ones, right? And so I was seized by this fear. Oh my God, maybe I died in my sleep. Maybe the rest of it is a dying hallucination. The trip to the hospital, the return home, the tearful reunion with my children, my reading a story to my daughter who's on my lap right at this moment. Maybe it's all a hallucination. I actually died in my sleep, and my wife woke up next to her dead husband, right? how would I know that's not true, right? So it's really, really, it's called derealization. It's really, really common with people who have almost died, either for medical reasons or from a near miss, like your friend. And so I got pretty crazy, right? I mean, one of the effects of trauma is anxiety and panic, and another is depression. And I actually went through those phases, a classic trauma reaction, but I didn't know it at the time. At the time, I thought, oh my God, it's been revealed. The word apocalypse means the revealing of all things, right? As I've experienced the apocalypse. I've experienced the ultimate revealing of what reality actually is. It's actually, we're not here. I really got crazy. And at one point I went up to my poor wife, her name's Barbara. I said, honey, can you just tell me that you see me? No spouse wants to hear this, right? Can you just tell me that you see me, that I'm right in front of you, that I survived? Like, just tell me that I'm here. And she was like, yes, sweetheart, you're here. I see you. You survived for the last time. You're fine.
Can you please take the garbage out?
Yeah. Can you please take? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, how about them dishes, right? But in my mind, I was like, that's exactly what a hallucination would tell you to maintain the hallucination. I didn't believe it. And she eventually said to me, and another very profound, like this nurse, like incredibly profound thing. She said, okay, Sebastian, do you feel lucky or unlucky that this happened to you? Right? Not that you survived. Of course you're lucky you survived. But if you could push a button and have none of it have happened, would you push that button? And I know what she was talking about, because on the one hand, I'm sort of cursed with this terror that I'm actually dead, or the reality doesn't exist, or what all these existential, epistemological sort of terrors, right? On the other hand, I was sort of allowed to look over the final precipice and return home. I had a special trip, right? Like, I was granted special access. I didn't have to pay with my life. I was allowed to come back. And like, was I lucky or unlucky? And I couldn't answer. I didn't know. And it really tormented me that I couldn't answer that question. And I finally answered it by putting it in more sort of mythological terms. I was like, all right, she's really saying, am I blessed or cursed, right? And often when I'm at a sort of dead end in my work, I'll look up the etymology, the origins of the important words in the topic that I'm researching, to see what sort of earlier generations, earlier eras, what significance they attach to these words. So
give me an example of what you mean.
Well, I will right now. With the word blessing. So the word curse, no one knows what its origin is. It's a total blank. Like, nobody knows. There's no known origin for the word curse. But
Really?
But blessing, there's some theories that is related to the word course, like a course that you're on that you can't deviate from. And there's some theories, but no one knows. With blessing, they do know what the origin is, and from the Anglo-Saxon word bletzian, which means blood. And the idea was that there is no blessing without a wounding, that the shedding of blood actually confers the blessing, right? So battlefields are sacred because blood was shed on them.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Childbirth is sacred because blood is lost. And they think it might date back to the pre-Christian rituals of animal sacrifice, where you kill the sheep or whatever, and the spilling of the sheep's blood is what makes that moment and that place sacred. And so it suddenly, I got it. I was like, oh, it's not that it's always, they're twin. Blessed and cursed are twin. They're part of the same thing, right? And so it's a false question. You don't choose. You don't even get to choose. If you're blessed, you're also cursed. If you're cursed, you might also be blessed. And the story of Jacob actually goes right back to that. He wrestles with God and is crippled by God, but also blessed. Like, God unjoints his hip and cripples him for life and blesses him at the same time. And so it's a very ancient human thought. And that just relieved me, for some reason, helped relieve me of this sort of like unanswerable terror.
If you might go, so in the next 20 years, this is going to happen again sometime. Maybe more.
Of the aneurysm?
No, that you're going to die.
Oh, they're going to die. Yeah.
Are you, how did this shape your, how did this shape your awareness that you'll do this again? You know, you'll have another moment, and maybe there will be the hole and your dad, you know.
You know, if part of my unconsciously, I think part of my horror at, if I was in a lot of pain and dying of cancer, I think my dad would have been a blessing and a relief to see, and I would have thrown my arms around him, like, please take me away from my pain-racked body. I'm done, right? Thank you. And one of the problems was that I was in the midst of my life. I had young children, and being taken away felt unimaginably tragic. And so if I live long enough that my girls are okay on their own, that my wife is not left as a single mom, that everything's okay, I'm going to miss them. But I'll be at peace with it. You're not, you leave children behind. You're not at peace. I mean, you know what I mean? Like you're a dad. I mean, imagine, right? Like, so,
it's the worst thought.
It's the worst thought is that, and that I'm going and I won't be around to protect them if they need it, and to love them when they need it. And it's unthinkable, right? And so it's the point of I'm an older dad. My first daughter was born when I was 55. Being a dad is what I'm doing, right? I'm not, I write books because I need to make a living. I could care less, right? Being a dad is what I'm doing. It's the center of my identity, my existence. And if I can get through to where they're okay, like, I'm good.
In your research, what did you turn up about that feeling of your life, people that have that say their life passed before their eyes? What's going on there?
Well, again, we don't know the answers to these things, but on a sort of neurochemical level, the brain gets very active when you're dying, and they've actually monitored people's brains while they were dying because they had to, for other medical reasons, they needed to know what was going on with the brain, and they were actually able to watch the gamma rays and the different gamma waves and the different waves in the brain that like are part of consciousness. They got to watch them change around the moment of death. And one of the things that happens as you die is that the parts of the brain that are engaged in memory activate when you die, right? So like when you're dreaming, like you can have a dream that feels like it takes, 10 minutes, right? And they know that those, supposedly 10-minute dreams happen in seconds, right? So one of the things that might be happening and this is in the neurochemical side of the explanation for NDEs. One of the things that might be happening is that equivalent to a dream, that you have an experience of a vast amount of time and a vast sort of perspective, right? You're seeing all of life in one moment, the kind of overarching knowledge that you can have with dreams. Like in dreams, you sort of understand things that you can't understand. There's this sort of all-encompassing knowledge sometimes. So that might be what's going on with that. And let me just say that there could be perfectly good neurochemical explanations for NDEs, and also a part of NDEs which neurochemistry can't explain that do tie into some basic question about quantum physics and what is reality, what is consciousness. The quantum physicists of 100 years ago realized that conscious observation changes quantum reality. Like if you observe quantum reality, if a conscious observer observes quantum reality, it changes it. And so the obvious question is, does consciousness in the universe, human and otherwise, does consciousness in the universe create the universe that consciousness then exists in, right? I mean, it's a profound question. And so when you're talking on those terms, the idea that the consciousness that you enjoy as when you're alive, that there's some other version of it that continues on as part of the universe, a kind of universal consciousness, continues on after you die. It's not an insane question, right? It's a legitimate question.
You get it, like this stuff. I was saying earlier about if I don't understand something, I try to ask.
Right.
I can't because I know that I can't understand quantum mechanics, quantum physics. But there's a trippy thing. Like if everything in the universe, like if everything's electrochemical with life, it's all electrochemical. You get into this problem where there cannot be free will, right? Like if everything happens according to physics, and you go like, well, life is electrochemical,
right?
there's no room. Then then a really good person who's really good at predictive modeling
Right.
would be able to you'd be able to like run all of it and predict the future because everything is electrochemical. Everything conforms to physics. And so when you get a lot of stuff, it's just like, it's kind of like when you're sitting there and you're looking outer space and you're like, even if there was like a big brick wall out there, there's shit on the other side of the brick wall. It's so hard.
Well, the sort of like Joker card in the deck there is consciousness. Is scientists don't understand, they can't even define what it is, right? The definition is something around the ability to think about itself, right? Sort of self-reflective. But they don't have a good explanation or a good definition of it. And they have no explanation for it, right? And the fact that consciousness can determine outcomes in the physical world simply because it exists and is observing.
Yeah.
So basically, if that's possible, all bets are out. All bets are off, sort of, right? So you're right in a purely mechanistic universe, but how do you fit consciousness into a mechanistic universe? And it doesn't seem to be. Consciousness resides in the brain, which is a sort of electrical chemical like process.
Yeah.
But it doesn't itself have. It's not itself manifested physically. Consciousness itself, right? But it can affect the physical world in profound ways, at least at the quantum level. So, and let me just say, you don't understand quantum physics, neither do quantum physicists.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the great mystery. Like, what they've shown is that things happen in the quantum world that sort of don't make sense in the macroscopic world, right? But it doesn't mean they can't explain why. Right. And for that matter, they can't explain why there's a universe. I mean, there really shouldn't be a universe. And, the universe, basically, religion and physics they're closer than you might think. So in religion, you have to believe that God is self-creating.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're stuck with, oh, well, someone created God. Why aren't we worshiping that entity? Right. Like, God has to be self-creating. From that point onwards, it all works fine. If you just take that leap, like, work with me here, God's self-creating, and then from now on, we're just believing that God, we're all good, right? Quantum physics is the same, or physics is the same way in some ways. Like, the universe is self-creating. After that, we can explain everything, right? So there's a similar act of faith, this leap that both have to take. I'm not saying that they're intellectually equivalent. I think religion is a story and physics is an attempt at an explanation. And stories and explanations are very, very different beasts, right? But on some level, they both require an act of faith that is probably beyond human comprehension.
When you finished the book, did you end that process with like did you now have your own understanding or your own ideas of stuff? Or were you just like, man, I don't know. I'd still.
Well, of course I don't know, right? I mean, I'm like, yeah.
Like, did you feel better, more like
So there's this idea about consciousness affecting the physical world at a macroscopic level. I mean, so one of the proposals is that consciousness, like gravity, is essential to the physical reality of the universe. I mean, it suffuses the entire thing. It's not visible, but it makes the entire thing possible. Without gravity, there wouldn't be a universe, there wouldn't be planets, there wouldn't be anything, right? Magnetism, likewise, these sort of like invisible forces. And, we get used to the idea of gravity, but if you didn't know anything and someone said to you, you know what, there's this invisible force, and the closer two objects are to each other, the stronger the force is. And if you throw a rock out a window, like, why wouldn't it float in midair, right? It doesn't, because of this invisible force called gravity. And it exists throughout the universe, and we don't know why, right? That would sound like the rantings of a schizophrenic, right? I'm sorry. Likewise with consciousness, so there's a sort of serious proposal that consciousness is part of the physical manifestation of the universe, like gravity is, and that our individual consciousness returns to that greater entity when we die. And it's you can't prove it or disprove it. It's a sort of pleasing theory for me. As an atheist, it gave me a sort of slightly more comfortable place rather than the just pure nihilism of we're a bunch of cells and when we die, we're done. I also don't want to have to be conscious in the way we're conscious now for eternity. Like, thank you, no, right? Like,
Yeah, I had a moment of panic earlier in this conversation when I was starting to contemplate that possibility.
yeah, I mean, it's like, careful what you ask for, right? I mean, 80 years is a long time, and we sort of limp through it at the end thinking, thank God there's a finish line here in some ways, right? But imagine an eternity of conscious. I mean, just, you remember what math class felt like in 5th grade? Like, imagine that for eternity, right? Like, just, will this never end? Like that's what I don't quite get about people of faith wanting an afterlife. I think they want to see their loved ones is what's going on.
Yeah. Let me hit you with another one that troubled me for a while. I had a scary thing happen one time, and I had that feeling of things. I had that feeling of my focus becoming singular, and in reading about why that was, like a feeling of like slowing down, things slow down, and then I was intensely focused on a thing.
Yeah.
And I was reading about that people in traumatic experiences, people in experiences, it's not so much near death experiences, but people in proximity to that there's like 2 paths. And the example that I read about one day was that there's an explosion, okay, and there's chaos. Some people can be in that moment, and there's an arm on the ground. The only thing they see,
right,
is the arm on the ground,
right,
and they just get lost in like a sort of timeless consideration of the arm on the ground,
right.
There's people that all they see is everything.
Right.
It's utter chaos. Nothing makes sense. And then there's people that are like, that guy needs help.
Right.
That's happening. That's going to fall. Right. And in certain disciplines, they're looking for the people that don't have those. And your experiences in war and your experience with with death, like have you ever grappled with that, or did you find anything in your research about these different sort of responses people have?
I mean, I've had I think we're all capable of all of them. I don't think there are like rigid categories where some people do this, some people do that. It partly depends on how much preparation you have. And one of the things they do when they train firemen or they train soldiers or what have you is they just get them to rehearse and practice the actions they'll need to take in a crisis moment over and over and over again, so that they teach paratroopers how to jump out of airplanes. They got that muscle memory of whatever they do. Count to 5 and whatever it is. Like, they get that muscle memory down so that it doesn't depend on deliberate thought. And so there's a lot of tactics in combat that are somewhat formulaic, like football is, right? I mean, there's a sort of team coordination that it doesn't have to be thought about in detail in order to be enacted. And if you have no training like that, your brain hasn't been properly formatted for that kind of situation, and it's scrambling to get enough information to make a good decision. And then, of course, people go into shock. And so I've had all of them. I mean, one time we got hit when I was with American soldiers, we got hit very unexpectedly, very hard. And for about 20 seconds, I was frozen. Like, I just couldn't move, right? I mean, there was bullets hitting the ground around, and then I snapped out of it, and then I was hyper-functional. Other times, In that 20 seconds, where were you mentally? Were you on an object, or like what was your focus on? It was a blur, right? And I couldn't keep up with the blur, so I couldn't make good decisions because it was like this jumbled blur. And my buddy, Tim, was behind a HESCO barrier, and we were taking a huge amount of fire. And one of the problems was I didn't have my camera and my bulletproof vest. If you're in a situation and you have a job to do, you're a medic, you're a journalist, you're a soldier, you're a parent with a child who's in danger, whatever it is, you have a job to do, like, that's a refuge from your fear. The job you have to do provides a shelter from your own feelings of fear and self-concern. If you have no job to do because you're not holding your camera, your fear just moves in and sets up camp, right? So Tim threw across, we were this far away, like between me and you, like 5 feet. We couldn't, there was too much gunfire and he threw me my bulletproof vest and my camera. And as soon as I was like geared up, boom, I was good. Right? right?
Yeah.
And so that gives you insight into how soldiers perform under pressure. They've got jobs, they got weapons, they got they got the gear, the tools they need. They have something they have to do. They're not thinking about their own fear because they are charged with such responsibility for each other. And it looks from the outside, it looks like bravery. Actually, those roles that soldiers play in combat are a very powerful protection from fear. You understand? You don't have to overcome fear to do them. They are a protection from the fear, as would be true if, I find grizzly bears absolutely terrifying, right? If my child was in danger from a grizzly bear, I don't think I would find the grizzly bear terrifying. I would try to distract it. I would, you know what I mean? Totally changes that fear equation.
I was with one of my buddies who's a firefighter yesterday, and it kind of seems random, but we're looking at this thing in my yard, and there's a big cobweb. Okay, and I wanted to clean this trough out. And I was saying that I was going to have my kids do it, but my daughter, that I've come to respect, my daughter's hatred of spiders.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I was like, dude, you could hand my daughter anything on the planet.
Yeah.
She's going to grab it if I said to grab it, unless it's got a cobweb on it.
Yeah.
And he says, for me, it's eyeballs. And I said, well, that seems avoidable. He goes, not my line of work.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see. Yeah. And one traumatic incident. Yeah, and then it's locked in, eyeballs. Like, no, thank you, no. I have arachnophobia since I was a young child.
Oh, okay.
I sympathize with your daughter. I remember at one point I was sort of joking around. I said to my wife, listen, I'll protect you and the family from anything. Grizzly bears, home intruders, whatever, anything. Except
black widows.
Except spiders. Like, we're camping in the Southwest and there's a tarantula, it's yours. Like, I'm not doing it. And you can tell it's a phobia because people with phobias have trouble even looking at a photograph of the thing they're scared of. Right? I know tarantulas will hurt you.
No, I've tested this out. I was skeptical. I've tested it out. It's legit.
It's legit. Oh,
and
totally.
I've come to accept it.
Yeah.
I used to be like, give me a break.
Yeah. No, and it has nothing to do with the danger that's posed. Right? And that's where the photo comes in. You can't even look at a photo. It's a really deep-seated panic reaction. You can't just turn it off.
You know, what's interesting about it is she has incredible detection skills. Like, I wish she was afraid of deer. She'll come in the room. Like, if she walked in this room and there's a spider, somewhere, boom, on it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a great skill.
Oh, totally.
But just applied to something I'm not interested in.
Well, if she was in the tribe, that would be her job.
Yeah, spider detector.
I feel like we each sort of have
spiders.
our own little.
Yeah.
What are you going to work on next?
I don't know.
Are you searching?
A little bit. I mean, this book felt like a sort of capstone of my career. I'm 63, and it's about such an ultimate question that it was hard to think about something, then what's next after writing about what, life after, what are you going to?
Well, you could write a book about what you ought to have done different.
That's right. So I don't know. I've spent a lot of time as a dad, as a parent, and my wife had pretty major surgery last fall, so we've been sort of in a fallow period because of that as well. She's coming out of it, so I'm going to work on something, but I don't know quite what yet.
Yeah, but you might wrap it up.
No, I love writing. I mean, it's like I love running. I don't run races anymore, but I love the act of running, so I still run, and I love the act of writing. Like, it's one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had. And
you like the act of it.
Yeah, I love it.
Doing it.
God,
I hate doing it. Yeah. I only like having done it.
Right.
I hate doing it.
We all have people that treat running like that, right? I don't like doing it, but I love it afterwards, right? And no, I love it. It's a higher state of mind for me.
Doing it.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Not always, but when it's good. Musicians say the same thing, right? When they're really
that's
on.
All fun, man. That's like
well, for me, it's
it,
a kind of music, right? I mean, the sentences have to have cadence, they have to have rhythm, and they got, there's a lot of musical components for me to the experience of writing.
Are you familiar with the writer Ian Fraser?
Yeah.
Yeah. He once told me that he wrote a lot of humor. He was a humorist. I mean, some of his stuff is he wrote about Stalin and the pogroms, but he also wrote a lot of humor, And he said when he wanted to be a writer, when he was young and he wanted to be a writer, he always imagined a writer sitting at his typewriter chuckling to himself. I didn't want him not being that way.
Yeah, right. Right.
You know who's got an interesting philosophy about, like, you're talking about whether you'll do another one? I don't know if you're a Quentin Tarantino fan. I am.
Yeah, sure,
Very
yeah.
much so. Very much so. I don't know if he'll stay true to it, but he has said for a long time, I will make 10 movies. I've made 9.
Wow. Yeah.
And that, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
I'm a
doesn't
little
want to turn
skeptical.
into a washed up director.
Yeah.
That's
I'm like skeptical.
Yeah.
He's gonna do 10, and then
Right. Yeah. I mean, if,
it's hard to picture the end, man. But it all ties into that mortality shit, you know?
yeah. And I'm not going to write a book just because I should write a book. Like, it has to be a topic that I find so compelling that I can't not. Right? Like,
Yeah.
that's what it has to feel like.
Yeah. David Grand, you know, the writer David Grand.
Yeah, of course.
When he was on, he came on recently after finishing The Wager. And I just found it interesting. He was like actively searching.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
He was hunting for a topic.
Right.
Which is cool.
Yeah, it's a different way to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it kind of has to come to you, like falling in love. If you're actively looking for your wife out there, like you may not find her. You know, you may not recognize. Like, and I feel like it's a little bit like that. Like if you're trying too hard at it, like you won't see the essential things that you need, the essential qualities that you need in that thing. You might not see them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I feel like and you know, I feel that way about God as well. Like sometimes people are like, are you kidding? You're still an atheist? You haven't found God? I'm like, look, God has to find me, right? I mean, if I'm making a decision to believe in God, it's a decision and it doesn't have much content to it, right? Like,
I don't know. I don't understand what you mean.
well, God, my understanding about faith is that it's an overwhelming feeling of love and connection,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So it's like if you're just deciding to marry Susie, you might not be in love with Susie, right? It's a higher level decision about something you want to have in your life. Fine, no problem, right? But I'm not sure that that's love, right? And likewise, a higher level decision to, now I'm going to believe in God. I was mortally terrified. I almost died. Now I'm going to believe in God just to be on the safe side because, you know, maybe he gave me a break. That isn't what religion really should be about. Religion should be about an overwhelming feeling of connection and love. And that, like love for another person, I think it has to find you. If you're out seeking it,
I understand.
you don't understand what I'm saying. So like if somehow God came to me in some form and overwhelmed me in a moment with a profound feeling of connection, I'd be like, okay, you convinced me.
Yeah.
I got it, right? I wasn't looking for you. You found me. I'm all ears. Like, what more do you got to say? I'll listen.
We just released this. It wasn't our project in this room, but one of our guys on our network had this episode that he made. He does these kind of mini documentaries, audio documentaries, you know. So what's the word I'm looking for? What's an audio documentary? Bear Grease.
Podcast?
I know, yeah, but no, man, you could have a podcast with dude humming.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, that's just like a distribution platform, right? Whatever.
You're right. It's like a documentary.
Yeah.
Anyhow, he's doing this bit on this guy, and the guy has what you're talking about. The guy has an epiphany in a moment.
Right.
And was an addict, you know?
Right.
And he describes like where he's standing on what day, what was happening, and all of a sudden, like all was made clear.
Right.
And dropped his addictions.
Yeah.
Committed himself to his wife. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it was like he had like an epiphany.
Well, that's
like he got overwhelmed.
Right. And that's very powerful. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I would need evidence to believe in God. I need evidence of God. Right. Like I believe in gravity because there's evidence that gravity, you know, throw a rock out a window, it will fall. I believe in gravity. I need evidence of God. And for me, evidence of God would be that God suddenly presents, I'm going to have to say itself, because the idea of applying gender to God is silly, itself in my life in an overwhelming way where I cannot turn away. And I'm like, okay, that passes the test.
Yeah.
right?
A lot of dudes listening are like, it happened when you almost died.
Well, no, except I didn't see God, right? Like, I mean, I saw my dad, right?
Yeah.
And I saw the nurse and I did not see God.
Mm-hmm.
And if I had, we might be having a different podcast right now, right? But I didn't. What the things that I saw were very real world and mundane, and one of them I can't explain, which is my dead father hovering above me. But it may just be I can't explain him because our human minds are sufficiently limited that ultimate reality is not accessible to us.
Yeah. Well, man, I'm glad you pulled through.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming on the show. Do you mind, what's the best way for people to go? Do we have a good list of all your books here on our document?
I'll rattle them off right now.
Yeah,
if
do
you
it.
like.
Rattle them off, man.
Yeah,
Like, you had a book about a murder. Like, do the whole thing.
Yeah. So my first book was called The Perfect Storm. It was about this huge storm in 1991, sword fishing boat that was lost offshore, 100-foot waves, et cetera. My next book was called Fire. It was a collection of my long-form journalism, including quite a lot about wildland firefighting, hotshot crews. Then after that was A Death in Belmont. When I was 6 months old, we lived in Belmont, Massachusetts. My parents were building an addition to their house, and one of the three carpenters was a guy named Al DeSalvo. And he, a couple of years after they finished building the addition to the house, Al confessed to being the Boston Strangler. And he was killing people while he was working at our house. And there was a murder down the street that was a classic Boston Strangling, but a black handyman from Mississippi happened to have cleaned this lady's house that day, left his phone number on the counter. The police got the phone number, chased him down. He was convicted and sent to prison. He died in prison for a murder he says he didn't commit. And no one knew that Al DeSalvo was down the street at our house that day, all day by himself, that he might have committed the murder. So A Death in Belmont is about that possibility. It's a cold case whodunit, basically. After that, I wrote a book called War about this platoon in the 173rd Airborne that I was with off and on for a year in the Corinne Valley. I also shot a lot of video with my buddy Tim, and we made a documentary called Restrepo that was nominated for an Academy Award. A couple months after we were at the Oscars, we didn't win, but a couple months later, we were supposed to go on assignment to Libya together to cover the Arab Spring, and at the last moment, I couldn't go. And Tim was killed. He died of blood loss from a shrapnel wound in his groin in the city of Misrata. And after that, I decided to give up war reporting. And I wrote a book called Tribe about community and how it works and how soldiers experience it, Native Americans, and how the loss of community has affected people in this country and the nation as a whole. And after that, I wrote a book called Freedom. It was an examination of successful underdog groups and how they defeat greater powers. Like if smaller individuals couldn't defeat larger individuals in combat, or if smaller groups couldn't defeat larger groups, the empire would always win, right? I mean, the world would be made up of like fascist coalitions. Mm-hmm. But that's actually not true. Like smaller underdog groups are very good at winning as long as they have certain attributes. And so my book Freedom goes into what those characteristics are that allow smaller groups or smaller individuals to win over larger, more powerful adversaries.
Like, why did the Americans win the revolution? Yeah. Why did the Viet Cong win Vietnam?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And the problem, just the very brief version is with strength and size comes a loss of mobility, a loss of agility. That's true for an individual in a boxing ring. It's also true for, the U.S. military or any military. And the smaller you are, the faster you are. And that can more than compensate for your lack of size and strength. So without that unique trait, it's unique to humans and every other species, size wins, size dominates, right? Only in humans can the smaller entity win. And that allows for human freedom, for human autonomy, for self-definition. And then finally, my recent book is called In My Time of Dying. And it's about my near-death experience and what that might mean for all of us facing our mortality and what it might mean for how we understand the universe to function.
Great. And then you have a website, like how if people want to track you down?
Yeah.
Not you down personally, but go find like a collection of all your stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously on Amazon or your local bookstore, it's easy to get.
Well, you
books,
probably
but,
have one of those author profiles on there where people can see everything packaged on Amazon and stuff.
Yeah. But you can also go on SebastianJunger.com is my website, and it's JUNGER, SebastianJunger.com. And all my stuff is there as well.
All right. Thanks for doing the show, man. I appreciate it.
I loved it. That was a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.